Hello. Okay, let's give this a try. This is my first run at live streaming some coding on. Oh, that's loud. Let's just turn that off. That's my own voice. Okay, you can tell it's live. Okay, so my name is Max, and this is my first run at live streaming some coding on the app that I work on most of my time. And I kind of wanted to give this a practice because we do a lot of work with kind of the wider development community and those using Rails, Ruby, JavaScript, and React, which are kind of the primary technologies that we use. And so, what I thought would be interesting is kind of seeing how we use those technologies, live streaming it, and just taking a look at some of how we do things. And then if this works, if it's interesting to people, we can start to kind of use that to maybe run some tutorials or just kind of show how we build things for an app in production. We have, not a huge number of users. It's thousands of people moving through the system pretty consistently. So if you don't know, Echoleft is an app that helps organizations fundraise, run events, including the ticketing and registration of those events, and it helps them run campaigns. This could be awareness campaigns, fundraising campaigns, and things like that. So we help organizations basically bring people together and help them raise money. So they are often charities, but it doesn't have to be. They can be corporate sponsors of events and things like that. And what I thought might be a good thing to do, a kind of a trial thing for this first live stream, would be to look at a bug that I'm fixing. And it actually uses all of those technologies that I mentioned earlier, so it's Rails and React. I'm not going to provide too much context on this. I'm kind of just going to dive in because I do need to fix this bug. It's not even a bug, just a thing that's happening in what I'm developing. But I'll try and describe what I'm kind of how things work as I go through, and then it'd be useful to get some feedback on whether any of it made any sense. So I'll kind of describe what we're doing here. This on the right hand side is the Chrome window that we've got. I've tried to make everything fairly viewable on just one screen. I actually have a 3-screen setup, so had to kind of cramp everything down. Hopefully it's visible. And in Chrome you can see what our admin users would see. And then we've got VS Code in the background, which is my IDE and what we use to work on the code. I've bumped the font size up, but I'll check later to see if that is readable at all. Okay, so let's describe the feature that I'm building. So at the moment, when you run an organization, this organization is called Demo because this is just my development environment. We can create events, and we can do a bunch of stuff with those events. And we've got an event here called the Big Climb, and we can have attendees that attend. They can make bookings. And when we go into manage our event, we get a bunch of information about it. And what I'm building in now is the ability to add sponsors to an event, because that's a really big bit of feedback that we get, that it's vital that people need to promote their sponsors. And so by allowing them a place to give us information about the sponsors, we can do more with that once we've got them. So we can add them to the event page, we can start adding them to the emails that go out, we can start doing more. And so all we really want at the moment is the sponsor's name. We want their little bit of information, like a little very short description and a logo. And that's all we really want for now. So it's a pretty simple CRUD-based thing. We basically want to create new sponsors, take a look at them, upload a photo for them, update them, and delete them if we want to, destroy them. And so everything in here is pretty, Echoleft is definitely a very CRUD orientated app. We have a lot of kind of extra complexity on top of that, but not really. At the core of it, it's just a lot of CRUD behavior. And so this is what I've been working on. The UI here is rough, so just bear with me. And I've added a couple of sponsors here. So basically we've got the kind of hierarchy of things. We've got our organization, our charity, in this case, Demo. We've got our event, which is the Big Climb. So one organization has many events, and then one event has many sponsors. And this is the index view for these sponsors. We've then got a link to edit them, and we can change the information about them. Now, the actual bug that I'm experiencing is in the adding a logo. So we mentioned Rails and React. We use Rails, and before the new Rails component for uploading photos or for any kind of file, which is active storage, we were actually already doing something with that similar kind of pattern, that kind of polymorphic, store all of the uploads as one in one place, and then kind of use that polymorphic association to reference them. So ours are called file assets rather than, I don't know what they're called in, I think they're called attachments in active storage. I haven't really tried to implement that yet, but so basically we have a file asset, and we associate, so our sponsor has a logo, and the logo is, sponsor has one logo, and the logo is a file asset. And so we then have a simple React component that uses file stack to go and upload the photo. It uploads it. It then triggers a background job to process the photo, which does a bunch of stuff in the background. And what it then importantly does is it tells the sponsor, it just fires back to our API to tell the sponsor there's been updated, so basically save the file asset. And all we do is we save a JSON, kind of a JSON API formatted version of that file asset. So it's pretty basic what that looks like. Go in here and grab some picture of a balloon so we can upload the photo. If I bring up the inspector, I'm just going to see what happens here. And you'll see, I think this is currently, yeah, so if we show it working first, so that should be in, and then if we upload that photo, you'll see it get uploaded, and then we make a call to /file assets, post call to file assets, and it basically creates this JSON API formatted version of our file asset. It brings back everything we need about it, and then what that actually does is it triggers, we basically have to wait for the background processing. We actually return a temporary version of that, some background processing happening, and we actually poll for that. So we should send off, I think this might have happened so quickly because it's locally, but we do then, oh no, so these are requests saying, hey, are you done yet? Are you still processing? And then when you're done processing, it goes to grab the original image. So so everything's working. So that actually does work as expected. But the issue we have is when we go back to list our sponsors here. So at this point in our sponsor, here we have sponsor.logo.url. So if we basically just take that out for a second and show you how that UI does look. So there's a photo here that should show next to each sponsor, and it's their logo. And at the moment, we either have one or we don't. So there either is an associated file asset. So this is the sponsor model. So there either is one logo or there's nil. And that's actually not very useful for us because we want to call in the view, we want to call .url, and we want to have a valid URL come back. We don't really care what it is. We either want the processed image, we want, you know, some sort of processing indicator, or we want just a standard, there's no image here, gray missing.png that we use. So the issue that we have is that we're getting nil back on that association. So when we call .url, we're like, oh, hey, we can't show you .url. We don't have a logo. So that doesn't work. So if we just pop that back in, I can actually take that. Let's check out. We get an exception here because it says I don't know what I'm trying to get the URL for. There is no logo. And so the way that I looked to resolve that was I'll be like, oh, okay, well, I'll just add a method called logo, and basically if there is nothing from super, which is the association, return a blank file asset, because I know that will respond to URL. It does some logic there, but basically it'll probably end up we use paperclip for our uploader. So it will probably just bring back .url, which is what I want. I want it to come back with the right thing. So that then, if we change that, that actually then does work here. Okay, so now we get our missing .png. So you can actually see if we inspect that image, we then get assets missing and it's fingerprinted image. Fine, that's great. Everything is happy with that. So the issue comes where we want to change our image. So if we go into Edit, Test Corp, and we want to choose our new logo. So we're going to go and grab our photo and just turn on Inspector first. And we're going to grab some balloons again. We're going to upload those. And this is where our problem comes. Everything here works and we bring back a 201. We've made our file asset. It has come back as correct. But we get an error here in our React components where we don't have the file asset being passed correctly to the viewer. We basically have this kind of grid item. It's basically a way of viewing a file asset. So all that React component does is it basically polls. If the file asset is processing, it's the thing that does the polling until it's finished processing. So it is not being set correctly. So that's the source of our bug. So that's where we are. So I was kind of hoping that my brain would have triggered by just kind of rubber ducking that out, but that hasn't happened. So let's keep going. Okay, so let's take a look at what we do have in here for the file asset. So we've got the processor. We do have that. So let's jump back to where our error is happening and see if we do that again, what is actually happening when that gets hit, or is it never hit? Okay, so the error is being thrown there, but we never seem to actually hit it. So we hit it when the page loads. Okay, and because the processing is done, we do have our logo. So that the upload and the save did work. The issue was in the JavaScript passing that over. So I wonder if that's the way that works. Is we use postal. This is all JavaScript, so you can take a look at it on production. So we have an uploader, and the uploader triggers we use postal as a pub sub library. So basically tell, hey, I've finished the upload, I'm done. Go and do stuff with it. So the uploader is actually a separate component. That choose logo button, I think, is should be able to see this in here actually. So that is actually the advanced file picker. So this is actually the advanced file picker component, and this is the file asset single. So they don't know anything about each other. They're not nested. It's just the pub sub library. One listens for the event of the other ones. So I think that what's happening here potentially is that when this event, when the file picker says, hey, I'm done, when does it call .logo though? When does it have the issue with getting back the logo .logo? Because it does work if we just extract that out. Okay, so, well, let's check to see if that then works. So let's take a look at our components. So we've got, that is grid item, and then the grid item viewer, and the file asset image viewer. So I think that's where we, file asset single, I think is where we pass the saving success. So I think that's actually where we might be having the issue. So let's try that again. I didn't refresh that, did I? Okay, I did. So we do get the file asset information and it is processing, okay. But that's where the error was happening. Okay. So now it's still working. Ah, okay, so it works when there was one there previously. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So this is gonna work. Right, okay, so it's only when the initial, there is no initial, so because there is now a logo and we're just replacing it, there is always a logo there. It's on that initial load that there is no logo, so it must be returning nil somewhere. Okay. So let's make a new sponsor with no logo. So let's go to sponsors again. The user interface here is just still in development. So let's add another sponsor. This is all basic. So let's call this no logo. Number 1. I'll save that. Okay, so when we go to edit no logo, this one will fail. And we want to know at what point it fails. So let's give this another try with some colors. Okay, so we've still got a debugging code and we never hit it. Okay, right. Okay, so we so the error is coming in file asset grid item. Okay, so what these are is basically the file assets are the images usually that we get back, and we have this idea of a grid because we might want to view more than one, and so you can pass to the grid a series of file asset objects, and then each one is given an item viewer. We then look at the type of the file asset, and they're usually images, so we just put in the image viewer. So the idea will be that as the types of file assets change, you can then just have the grid loop over the grid items, and each one can look at the type of file asset it is and then work out how to show it in that grid, and then you can just have different types of viewers. So that's why we have file asset grid item, file asset grid item viewer. That's what the hierarchy of is trying to happen there. So the error is coming down on file asset grid item, and it's there. It's because that one is using the props to set the initial state, but there is no file asset on the initial props. Is that right? Okay. So now if we refresh this, because it works in the background, that presumably is there. So every time we have to make a new sponsor. So I'm never going to remember the numbers in order, but let's just do 2 this time. Okay, so the issue we have is when we go to sponsors, and go to edit, go to React here. The advanced file picker, okay. Right, okay. So file picker, advanced file picker. So when we're rendering these, we then create a file processor. Okay. We then create the information we get back from, but we do get the file asset back. So when do we actually get to the file asset grid item? Okay, so advanced file picker calls the processor. The processor is then what calls postal and publishes or broadcasts the event that it's done. And it is up to the file asset single to pick it up. Fine. That then drops in here with the file asset, which updates the state of this, which then renders the file asset grid item, key, and file asset. And so that should only render what's just been passed back. From the save being successful. Oh, hang on, is that erroring? Ah, that's erroring before we even try and upload. Oh, okay. Oh, okay, it's not rendering on upload. It's rendering, it literally can't. It's already failed. Okay, wait. Okay, so in the render grid item, method of, or function of file asset grid item, do we just say that if it's nil, Okay, so there's a definite assumption that there will be a file asset passed in to the file asset grid item. Okay, so that has obviously not been designed. Okay, so how is that rendered then? Is the issue when we actually render it out to the view? That should be in here. Okay, so I think this might be why we're assuming there's already a file asset being passed in, and it's here. Okay, right, okay. So it was actually in the view. So resources is an empty hash. File asset serialized to hash. Okay, so if you look at what's happening here. Okay. That data there, we want our so the resources file. Okay, great. And so there we should be getting we should be getting, but shouldn't we be getting an empty file asset object? Shouldn't we be getting sorry, from our sponsor model, from logo, shouldn't we be getting that? Because we want file asset series, if file asset aha, okay. That is not serializing it to hash if there isn't one there. So now what do I actually get in there? I still get no. Serialized to hash. But when we go to look, I'll be the edit view for this. So file is sponsored.logo. Thanks. I can't see. Oh, it's nice to have viewers. I'm popular. Okay, so let me keep going on this too. Okay, so let's see what we actually get. Back for this. Actually, let me clear that out so you can actually see it. So if we call that, we get a last sponsor, and if we call serialized to hash, oh sorry, it's sponsor dot last dot logo. Ah, that is where that is coming from. Okay, that's perfect. So it's getting nil back from here. But it should be getting a nil. Okay, so it's bringing back a file asset, but for some reason it won't then call serialize to hash on it. Okay, I'm definitely missing something glaringly obvious here. So sponsor.last.logo brings back an empty file asset. Fair enough. Can you call serialize to hash on an empty file asset? No. That's where the nil comes from. That is where this bug comes from. I was expecting that to give me an empty data structure and basically looking like basically looking like this, but it is not doing that. So we just need the file grid item just to know that. So can it just ignore this earlier? So what does it have for this.state.file asset? Nothing, because it doesn't have this dot. Oh, okay, so we can just okay, it's trying, it shouldn't even be trying to load the grid item. Okay, let's go back up the chain. So it shouldn't be trying to load the grid item. So let's just debug from there as well. Okay. So this.state.file asset is nil. So is this so you're saying it's not so what is this? Right, okay, it's not that that's empty. Can we just say okay, and the reason we're asking if it's empty is presumably in that view we had earlier. There we were passing in an empty hash, and that's why there was an if clause on the end there. Okay. So we can, so that includes single file picker. Just discard those changes. So we're actually going to leave that if clause in there because then we can pass that through as empty. Because it's coming back as data null. So basically if it's empty, can we do, I actually don't know how JavaScript processes, will it do left to right or right to left for these? I.e. can you do what you can do in Ruby, which is where you don't really care if they go right to left in Ruby. So can I write not this dot state dot file asset data, will that work? That's true, there is nothing in this data, and then this isn't empty because it's got a data key with no value set. But now this should not load, so we don't have an error. Let's just remove these real quick. We fixed it. Okay, cool. So the issue was that we are being passed, when we set this association on sponsor to bring back a blank file asset, instead of passing back an empty file asset when we ask the JSON API serializer to serialize it, instead of being brought back that kind of empty shell which has attributes, we get data and null, or I'm guessing in Ruby it brings back a hash with data and nil, the key and value, and then in JavaScript that was data and null. And that's not what I was looking for then in the component that was being passed that to begin with. So now the only change that's needed was this check here, this additional check to say, okay, well, do I have a file asset, like, and that would have been passed into state by either the pub sub bringing back a saved success, or passing in from that partial, passing in the file asset as it was basically being passed from the view, which is using this. So basically when we render out the React component in the view, we actually call to.json on it, and we control the structure of those. So we could then call HTML save because we control what goes in them, rather than that being unlimited. So we sanitize those, we check them, they come back out, and then that coming back as data nil, then preventing the component from working. So we now have our sponsor that we've just created. So let's check that. So we can now check that by hopefully final sponsor. Hopefully we create it. Added a view to that yet. we get our default missing image because what's actually being passed back there, that is Rails asking for a file asset. So that's not a React component. That is just us asking for .url, and it's just bringing back a standard missing image, which is fine. We can then control what that is. We can actually control it at any level we like. We can actually control it down here at the default photo here for the file asset, but I think we could also override it here on this file asset. We can actually define a new default photo for that instance, I think. And then if I go in and edit it, choose a logo, add my photo, it uploads, it processes first time, it works, I can save that, and then it is done. And that is our bug fixed. Amazing. Well, not really a bug because it's not in production, but our issue with creating new sponsors in my new feature. So I just need to get the views done for this so that it looks right, and then we can get it shipped. So I hope this first stream worked. It's kind of just testing it out. And hopefully we can take a look at this and see if there's any more React and Rails stuff that we can do. Hopefully we'll jump back a bit and put more context in and kind of maybe run people through some things end to end and kind of get a sense of what might be useful for people to take a look at. Thanks a lot.